Welcome back to your dose. We're the plug for all things prevention.
I'm your host, Azine, and today I have with me two new members.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah Hairston. I'm an 8th grader at House Academy.
Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm an 8th grader from House Academy.
Today's prescription, we bring to you Why Are You Prevention? And we are going to be interviewing a very special person to the community of New Britain. He is the very epitome of prevention, Mr. James Jones.
Hi, my name is James Jones. I'm a retired Dean of Students from Slade Middle School after 26 years of service and currently the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of New Britain.
Thank you very much. So the first question that we would be asking you is, how do you handle managing your Boys and Girls Club program?
So I handle my Boys and Girls Club program just as well as I handled Slade Middle School. So it's operational just like a middle school, but after school with tons of fun and activities such as STEM, homework club. We do a Smart Moves curriculum for our boys, social emotional curriculum, Smart Girls social emotional curriculum for girls, lots of recreational activities, swimming, basketball, outdoor play. So we keep them occupied and busy.
Wow, that's great.
I also have another question I would like to ask you is, in what ways has prevention benefited you?
Well, I grew up in New Britain just as well as you guys did, and I lived in Mount Pleasant, one of the toughest projects in New Britain. And I kind of lived my life growing up looking at people saying what not to do. Otherwise, these are the results. So I saw a lot of different situations in the community and just locked in to say, don't do this because you'll end up like this.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I grew up.
It's very understandable.
What are some other strategies you know to prevent substance use?
So let me. I seen substance abuse destroy a lot of people, even close people in my family. I saw people who were just like great people, and then the drugs took over their lives. Not just drugs, but alcohol. I witnessed a friend in high school who was just like very talented on many different levels, and he smoked some bad marijuana one day and had marijuana psychosis, and he's just not the same. When I see him, he doesn't even recognize us sometimes. If I say his name, he'll be like, oh, yeah. What's your name again? And I mean, we grew up together, and there's no way that he should not remember my name. So,
yeah, that's very sad to hear.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's common with a lot of people. And it's just one of those things where watching someone experience it truly just plays in your mind never to do something like that because you don't want to turn out like that person. And another question is, what role do you play in your family or the children that you coach at the Boys and Girls Club? What role do you play in their lives with prevention?
Well, I'm honest with kids. When we see certain situations, there's not a kid that I don't talk to. Number one, I speak to every kid that walks by me. Good morning, how you doing? Whoever you are. And that kind of builds a relationship with them. And then I don't care if you're 20 years old. If I see you on the streets doing something that you shouldn't be doing, I will roll my kids are always like, oh, you're always policing. But I think you make a difference when you say something and you're straight up with kids. And if I see a kid, like say I'm driving down the street and one of my former students is smoking weed, out of respect, and he sees me or she sees me, they're going to stop immediately. Like, oh my God, because I have a standard that I hold people up to. And I don't treat anybody different from my kids. So when I grew up, the neighborhood took care of you. So if someone saw me doing something, they'd be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm going to tell your mother, but, deal with me accordingly. And I think a lot of the people in the community have turned an eye to other people's kids and they don't think it's their responsibility to, I don't want to say police, but police other people's kids. But it takes a village to raise a child.
It truly does. And I think that also at times, some of these kids, they don't have that parents to police them and they kind of don't have that role model per se. So I think it's very critical that we have some sort of role model here in New Britain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about how setting that standard for kids is a very big thing, especially now because it's become so normalized for drug use and alcohol usage, especially things like that amongst youth. So I think it's very good that you being at the position that you are today, especially in the New Britain community, that I think that it's important that you set those standards. And I really
Yeah.
love that.
Absolutely. A lot of people assume our kids' parents know everything they're doing, and they don't.
They really
They
don't.
just, oh, his parents got to know if I know. It's not the case. A lot of people, think their child is, coming home, doing the right thing, going to school, doing the right thing. And, a lot of people just think that that's the norm, and it's not the norm for our kids. And
Yeah.
like I said, one bad batch can turn you into, a zombie. So.
Literally.
I have a question personally. So since you started participating in prevention events, how do you think it's impacted the community?
I think it really has impacted the kids because it's letting them know, hey, we're aware that there's a problem and we're trying to assist you with the problem. And I think a lot of our youth think because marijuana is legalized in Connecticut that it means it's okay for them, and it's not. It says for age 21 and up for a reason. Just like drinking, like there's a reason why, because your brain, it's not fully grown at 21, but you're more grown than 16, 17, 14, 15. And I think you're easily addicted when you're younger than you are addicted when you're 21. So
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because especially when you're younger, you're a lot more maybe easily swayed or malleable to
Yeah.
like influence and peer pressure and things like that. And even sometimes you don't have to feel pressured to do it, but because it's around you and in your community in such a way, you kind of feel almost uh non-pressure that's already put in place by the standards that we have in our community today.
Yeah.
absolutely.
So a question I have is like, what do you think the community, like as a whole, can like help improve or like relate to this prevention?
Well, not having a blind eye. Like if you see something, say something. Don't just let kids walk around smoking, and if you know their parent, you just don't say anything. And I think we have a huge issue with it being in kids' face all the time. So if you go to the little bodega to get chips or whatever, there's like all these vapes right at the counter. There's all kinds of stuff that just says smoke, smoke, smoke right in front of you. It wasn't that bad when we were kids. Like there was a shop downtown called Jimmy's Smoke Shop where you had to go buy your smoking stuff from there, and then they had like a curtain that you had to go through, so you didn't just get to see that in your face every day. And now it's just like there's not one store, a little bodega in New Britain, that doesn't have like vaping stuff right in the front counters, so I think it's like right in our kids' face every day, and they think, well, it's got to be okay if it's right here in every store. So somehow I think we need some kind of legislation or something that says, hey, you can buy smoking material at this store because you could only be 21 and up to go there. Kind of like liquor stores,
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I feel like they should be doing the same thing. So if I had my wish, that's what I would do.
And like you said, just it being right in your face like all the time, especially like going to a corner store, you can't even get a Gatorade without feeling like overwhelmed by the amount of drugs and
Yeah.
just things that aren't gonna help your future in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, communication helps too. Like a lot of parents don't communicate with their kids, what the dangers are, or have examples. Like I drive my kids when we're driving around. I'm like, hey, you know this person? Well, we grew up together. You see what happened to this person? So there's some, not pointing them out, but just making sure they understand that this was a great person. Not that they're bad because they're on drugs, but they're struggling right now. And that's why, because drugs got in the way. And I always tell my kids, if one of your friends offer you drugs, they're not your friends. Because not one of my friends, I can honestly say, I have a lot of friends growing up in high school, college in New Britain, living with roommates who did drink, smoke, whatever. They have never said, yo, try this, because they wanted me to win. My friends wanted me to be a winner in the community. And I feel like not one of them, if I think about it, not one of them ever said, here, yo, Jones, try this or anything.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah,
So.
for sure.
Yeah.
And making sure that you have those good friends and also setting your boundaries for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you're already a kid that knows that you don't want to really do drugs or don't really want to get or do marijuana or anything like that, you should already set those boundaries in place. And if those are really your friends, then they should know to not try and cross your boundaries like that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's also like one of the issues with youths or like middle schoolers now is that we're so easily susceptible to peer pressures that seeing a friend or seeing a couple friends doing this and they, oh, you want to try this? Oh, I bet you don't know how that tastes like, just
Right.
makes you more inclined to do so.
Right.
So I was just gonna ask. I mean, I know you kind of mentioned some personal experiences with them, but I was just wondering if you could give us more experiences on teenagers or youths or your childhood friends that had or went through like substance abuse.
Yeah. So, like I said, I had one friend who smoked a bad batch of marijuana,
Yeah.
and he, suffered from marijuana psychosis, and he's just never been the same. But a lot of our kids in our community, they don't have the resources to go to rehab. Rehab is very expensive. Your insurance doesn't cover rehab. And a lot of the kids who introduced them to drugs from different communities, because usually, believe it or not, our kids go to parties outside of New Britain, and it seems to be the norm at those parties. And one of my older kids, my niece and nephew, I raised my niece and nephew, told me one day, "Hey, I'm going to my friend's house, and don't worry, the mom has a key bowl." And I'm like, "What is a key bowl? Like, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, a bowl where she takes everyone's keys." And I was like, "Oh, you're not going to that party. You're 17. What do you mean a key bowl? Nobody should be drinking at a party for 17-year-olds." But it happened to be there was older kids at this party just because the siblings were older. But I didn't know anything about that. That's the first time I heard about it. He was going to a party in Simsbury, and I was like, "Yeah, no, not tonight." So I think a lot of parents don't know what's going on in other people's houses, and some people, have different rules. So that's why when my kids want to have friends, come over.
And like you said before about how it takes a village, and I also feel like that village has to get to know each other for them to build a stronger community for the kids. And like, I'm not sure if you saw my face, but a key bowl is ridiculous when you have 17-year-olds going to a party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get if they have siblings, but if you are okay with letting your younger children hang around with their older siblings who drink, that's fine. But I also feel like you should communicate with the parents of kids who are minors going to those parties.
Absolutely. Have you guys ever heard of a key bowl? No, right?
No,
I just heard that.
I
was like,
learned
what?
just now.
No, sorry. So yeah.
Yeah. So, what roles do you have at home or organizations that about substance abuse?
I tell my kids, if you're old enough to do drugs and drink or drive or any of that stuff, you're not on my insurance. You're in your own place, and you're grown.
Yeah.
So that's your business. So I will not participate in that. I will not condone that. I have zero tolerance for that. If that's your lifestyle, choose it, but not under my roof. And as a parent, you have to stick to what your values are. And sometimes your kids have to figure that out on their own. But I feel like the more your kids communicate with you about drugs, then that means they know it's not okay. Once your kids are withdrawn and they're not talking to you about it, or they're not saying, "Oh, I'm not hanging out with this kid because they smoke," then that might be a red flag.
Yeah. And I honestly feel like some kids just don't have that relationship with their parents to communicate about such issues like drug or like them using substances. So I just think it's honestly a matter of like finding a trusted adult to help you navigate that situation.
Or the local prevention group.
Oh, yeah.
Or
I will say, because a couple of kids learned a lot that they didn't know when you guys go to classrooms. So let's keep that moving because it's in the right directions. I know a lot of the kids from Slade talked about it, so there's things that they don't know and their parents don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you brought up communication between like parents and child, because I feel like some parents set the standard where it's like obviously you have to be their parent before you're their friend, but I also feel like you should give them that opportunity to also be their friend and be someone that they can vent to in ways that, so that way they can help get help before it gets too serious where they can't be helped anymore.
Absolutely. But let's keep the friend out of it. Make sure you're always the parent, but you're a communicator with your child, because they do need guidance. A lot of parents want to be their kid's friend,
Yeah.
and you can't be. You have to be a parent with some boundaries. And a lot of parents don't know how to do that. So I think we need to, as a district, as a community, teach parents the skills that we think that they have and they don't have. We used to do this program called Common Sense Parenting for Parents in Slade back in the day when I was a dean, because we would have kids constantly getting in trouble and the parents not knowing what to do. And we had social skills and do you guys do well-managed classroom where they have the social skills, like how to follow instructions? They used to have those in all the schools in New Britain. So there was a common sense parenting curriculum that followed that. So we would have expectations in the school, but we also taught the parents how to have those same expectations at home. You know, a lot of parents in our community are younger than, average. Like, I was 30 when I had my first child, but a lot of parents were 18, 19, 20. My parents were young when they had us, so they were learning and growing at the same time. And I think, a lot of people think our kids are supposed to come in with certain social skills and standards, and they don't, because their parents don't have them either. And instead of just, blaming their parents for it, we need to work with the families and the kids and try to have a happy balance. So,
Which I totally agree with. Um, how do you feel? I mean, I'm sure I already know about how you feel about it, but like if you were to see a kid, you've already responded to this question, but if you were to walk in your own, or if you were to see one of your kids using drugs or marijuana, how would you deal with that?
Communication, number one. I'd be really upset. But I like those standards that I just told you I had. I will implement them immediately and let them know, like, oh no, we're not doing this. Is unacceptable behavior, and I will let them know that, like, you, as a parent, if they're under 21 and they're breaking the law, you have to hold them accountable for it.
Right.
And I would hold them accountable. Like, give me your keys. You don't need to be driving. Hey, I'm gonna be checking you. If you're gonna live in my house, these are the rules. If I'm a parent, I would buy a test kit, and we would have an issue, because I'd be like, I don't trust you now, so let's do a test. It might get random tests, but have a conversation. Do you need help? Do I need to send you to rehab? Whatever I need to do, I'll do for you. But once you do that, it's on you. Because a lot of times when kids or, and adults go to rehab, if you come back to a situation and the person's going to take care of you again, then guess what? You're never going to change your situation, because you're always going to think that, okay, I'm going to lapse and then have someone to take care of me. You're just going to take care of me again. So,
which is why I think it's important that we teach kids responsibility now. And at all ages, especially even in small ways, like remembering to put your lunch in your backpack, even as an elementary school kid. And then as those things progressively grow, the responsibility should also grow, because those are life skills that you're going to need at all stages of your life.
And then pay attention to your kids too, because, kids send you signals constantly when they're growing up. And they send you signals whether they have an addictive personality or if they don't. And if you see like your kid is addicted to gaming or your kid is addicted to something, you really need to be opening your eyes to say, okay, so it shows that my kid can't balance out their addictions. So I need to be on top of making sure that they're not slipping down this path. Because, like, for instance, I'll give an example. Like, there's some kids that game every day, and if you took it away from them, they'd be like losing their mind. Now, that's a kid that is addicted to something.
Yeah.
If my kid was addicted to that, I would have to make sure that they're not hanging out with people who are doing drugs, because guess what? They've already developed the addictive personality. So knowing and understanding the psychology of youth benefits me, because I know how to train my kids' psychology as a parent, and there's a lot of parents who don't. Like, so my kids, they didn't get to play video games every day, because I don't want them to develop that. So my kids could play video games on the weekends, like they could play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But guess what? I'm telling secrets, so they're gonna be like, "Oh, you played us." But every Saturday, Sunday, and Friday, we either had AAU basketball, we had baseball, we had dance, we had, oh, we're going to the movies. So, oh, you can only play video games on the weekend, but every weekend we were busy. So they
Yeah.
never were allowed to get addicted to gaming because we were always busy. But they never picked up on the fact. Well, they probably did, but they never said nothing. But I wouldn't allow them to get addicted to that because, it develops that personality where you're constantly addicted to stuff. So we're always trying new things, my wife would always do educational stuff with them, bring them to the museum. Oh, guys, we're going to go see this. And whenever we went on vacation, it was always a learning experience. And then going back to where it started from, where it originated. So we're always teaching them. So
Yeah. I think it's important to keep your kids occupied as well, whether in
Absolutely.
school activities or out of school activities or
Absolutely.
For
church,
sure.
whatever. It's just keep your kids busy because then they won't have the time to really engage
Right.
in using substances.
Right.
So I think this conversation has been very, very insightful. And before we leave, we usually have a thing where we give advice to youths, everywhere, just related to our topic, which is prevention. So I just wanted us to go around in circle, just giving a piece of advice to someone out there that's struggling and doesn't really have that relationship with their parent, or they're kind of addicted, but they don't really know how to navigate that space. So if anyone wants to start.
I'm an 8th grader, so I understand if you've been around it and you're struggling. I completely understand that. I just want you to know that you have those resources. Mr. Jones is always going to be here. But if you're not in New Britain and you're watching this from wherever else, I want you to really try your best to build those relationships with your parents, with anyone, any trusted adult that you think that you could trust with this. And I hope that after hearing about the things that could happen, I hope that that thought stays with you and really reminds you that this is serious and that this is a serious problem that we face as a community and as a nation, to be honest. And I just hope that you're going to learn to do better, and that if you haven't done drugs yet, that you plan on not wanting to ever do those things. But I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Jones now.
Okay. So my message would definitely be to parents. As a parent, don't think, oh, it's just a phase that your kid is going to, because if your kid is constantly leaving school or skipping in the bathroom or something to smoke, that means that issue is bigger than you thought it was. And, we looked at the data last year, and one of the officers told us, a lot of the weed that they've collected from New Britain High School had, fentanyl laced in it.
Wow.
So if your kid is constantly leaving school in 20 degrees, 12 degrees weather, that's not just smoking weed. That's, hey, I'm addicted. This is a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And there's help out there. And if you need help, I'll be the first one to try to help parents and their kids, and if lead you in the right direction, but not something that you say, oh, well, I smoke too, so it's fine, because it's not the same. These kids are not allowed to go to a dispensary where the weed is legit. They're picking it up on the streets, or they're picking it up from anybody. So they really need to get their kid checked and get them checked to see if fentanyl is in their system, because if it is, then they have a bigger problem. So, there's resources out there, and we can discreetly help them. Half of the parents in the community that I know, they have my Facebook something, and they could just be like, Mr. Jones. And listen, I will be discreet and try to get them whatever help they need. But these kids, I just feel like they're not. Everybody thinks that our kids want to have toxic relationships with people and stuff. Nobody wakes up every day and be like, I'm going to go in there and give Mr. Jones a run for his money, blah, blah, blah. So I understand that. And a lot of parents are like, I don't know why you act like that every day. The problem is deeper than your kids just wanting to be toxic and come to school and be a jerk. It's bigger than that. And start understanding the fact that kids need help sometimes. And parents just think, oh, he's just like that, or she's just like that. And it's not the case. Kids are screaming for help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I would also say to like surround yourself with like a good influence, because if you keep surrounding yourself with like people who really like do these drugs and like drink alcohol when they really shouldn't be, then you're gonna get influenced and you're gonna try to do it too. So I'd say get some good friends who also know that since there's a age limit, if it says to drink at 21, that they also know that if you're gonna drink, then they do it after they're 21, so they know, and you know, and everyone is like has that understanding that they shouldn't be doing this, especially at that young age.
Yeah. And I feel like what she said was kind of what I was gonna say. If you're in that space where you are surrounded by people who engage in substance abuse or addicted to something that is wrong, is not right, I think it's important for you to create boundaries with them. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say cut them off, cut them off, cut them off. Just create that boundary and let them know that there is a boundary that they cannot cross and you cannot cross, because you
100%.
have your own beliefs. And if you happen to taste it or try it or whatever, I think it's important for you to also reach out. And I know that this might sound repetitive, because I'm sure teens all over the world have heard, oh, this is bad for you, this is what's going to happen to you. But I want you to actually know it's real. This stuff is actually real. And there's prime examples of people who thought it wasn't real, engaged in it, and then the consequences came upon them. So I think it's important for you to know that it is real. Set boundaries for yourself and your relationships with them. Create new positive relationships with people that are going to benefit and impact you in a positive way. And yeah, I hope that those wherever they are watching, parents, youths, I hope that you took something out of this and you implement it into your daily life. And with all that being said, we want to thank you for tuning into today's episode, and we shall see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.